Okay, so we still continue with the zero knowledge topic, but this is the first panel discussion of today. The topic shaping the next real world use cases of zero knowledge. So for this panel, we are going to deep dive into the following questions. The first one, what are some of the latest real world use cases of zero knowledge? The second one is which innovations to foresee with zero knowledge progress in both Web 2 and Web 3. And the last one is what are some of the particular hindrances to zero knowledge adoption. So today we are having our guest speaker and also the host for the panel. Please welcome with me Jane, co-founder from ZK Land. Yeah, the first chair, please. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Right at your picture. And please welcome Angus, developer relation from Meetup Protocol. Welcome. Let's welcome our host. Welcome back, Ji Zhuang. Welcome back, Anthony from Alio. And last but not least, please welcome Gnana, developer advocates from Startware. All right, now the stage is yours.
Test. Oh, okay. Glad. So cool. Hi everyone. So my name is Chi, and with us we have Jane, Angus, Anthony, and Gian. We represent different protocol, but first I would like to let everyone do a quick round of self-introduction. I'm from Nethermind. So we start from Gian and we go all the way to Jane.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Gyan and I work at Starknet. I'm a dev advocate and I've been in Web3 for a couple of years now, about 6, 7. Recently started exploring ZK about 2 years back and now trying to educate everyone on the same.
Hey everyone, my name is Anthony DiPrinzio. Maybe you heard my talk earlier. I lead ecosystem growth at Alio, been in the blockchain space since 2016. And yeah, just really excited to be on this panel.
Angus.
Hi everyone, my name is Angus and I do developer relations at Meetup Protocol. So, closer, is this okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so that entails basically talking to developers, helping them figure out how to build what they want to build using Meetup. So I've also been in blockchain for around 5 or 6 years, working with various different projects, but working in the ZK space now, and yeah, helping, meeting, and connecting developers.
Thanks, Angus. Hi, everyone. I'm Jane, and I'm one of the co-founders of ZK Land. I think I'm the only one here. Maybe she's like kind of a straddle between Stark and Nethermind, but I think I'm the only project here that's actually building on top of a ZK network. So hopefully, well, that will bring some perspective in terms of real-world use cases in terms of ZK technology. Yeah.
Thank you for everyone for the self-introduction. So let's start with Jane this time. Like, what does ZK mean to you and your team? Like, how do you leverage ZK?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess ZK represents a very powerful technology for us, specifically focused around scalability and efficiency. So I think a couple of talks earlier did mention ZK actually has 2 main use cases. One for privacy, and that's like real ZK, and then the other one's actually scalability, which utilizes validity rollups. For us at ZK Land, at this stage, at this point in time, we're actually more focused on utilizing ZK so that we can offer our users scale in terms of their transactions and very low transaction costs because they're interacting with a ZK network.
Angus, what do you think? What ZK means to you and to your team?
Well, so at Mina, we eat, sleep, and breathe ZK. So the Mina blockchain entirely runs using zero-knowledge proofs. It's a blockchain built from the ground up. So transactions, the smart contract layer, everything is verified using zero-knowledge proofs. So that's something that obviously it runs our whole platform, and indeed the protocol engineering side, there's a lot of people who are actually building the proof system, doing cryptography and the math, as well as doing the software engineering to implement it. So we are deep into ZK.
Cool, thank you so much. And we have Anthony from Alio. Like, what do you think about ZK and how does your team leverage on ZK?
Yeah, so like I mentioned during my presentation earlier, I guess similarly to Mina, like Alio's entire stack has been built from the ground up and designed for ZK to leverage its privacy-preserving properties in particular. I mean, out of the box, our solution is scalable in terms of its architecture, but again, our main focus is using ZK for what it was originally designed for back in the 1980s, which is privacy. And I guess maybe one way I like to think about it is, you know, we throw around this term privacy all the time, and sometimes that leaves a negative connotation, right? People associate privacy with like money laundering or some of these other illicit activities, but really it's actually a very enabling technology. And we'll probably talk a little bit about that during this panel, but I want people to think about ZK as a tool that lets you actually provide more security to different kinds of use cases and systems and architectures. And I think that's the message we want to get across to people.
Finally, Gian, what does ZK mean to you, and how does Starkware leverage on ZK?
Sure. So for me personally, I think the whole Web3 space, specifically ZK, is a fascinating topic because it's at the intersection of mathematics, cryptography, and technology. And it's really cool how you can do certain things, how you can build certain things without having to reveal information that is very personal to you. So that is very interesting to me from a ZK perspective, and why I've been diving deeper into this while looking at applications and products, etc. From a Starknet perspective, it's really all about scalability. As Jane already mentioned as well earlier, that one of the primary use cases that we see immediately that people can use, can help both developers and users, is scalability. So anyone who wants to build anything, basically scalable products, can easily use Starknet to do so. So that's one of the core principles. And of course, the other thing is also how you can build really things at scale with modular elements, right? So at Starknet, we don't just talk about Starknet as an L2. We also have several different projects, and maybe I will talk about that in a couple of questions further down the line. Other projects that focus on building modular components using ZK on top of this interesting proof mechanism called Starks, right? So yeah, these are a couple of things I would say that's from my team's perspective important.
It's great that you highlight about the other use cases and leverage on stocks. I think it's a good segue to our next question. What are the cool projects you have seen to be built on Starknet, for example, or in general? It could be scaling. I know Starknet is basically based on scaling. So what are the cool projects do you think that leverage Starknet enough that do you think that they really fit the scaling model?
So ideally, because Jane is on this panel, I should say ZK-Len.
Probably
but I'm
except for
sure
ZK.
she's going to talk about it.
Or except for ZK-Land, because she's going to say ZK-Land.
Yeah. So, but yeah, apart from that, I think there are a lot of really cool, very highly technical, but also fun things that are being built on Starknet. For example, Dojo is one of the gaming engines. You can find Dojo as Dojo Starknet on Twitter. It is one of the gaming engines that is being built in a way that any games that want to even utilize the power of ZK Starks can actually plug and play with Dojo and build their own games using this gaming engine. This is very interesting to me because on-chain gaming, even though everyone talks about it, is actually a very hard thing to build. Because especially when you're thinking of elements like zero knowledge proofs. For example, I think one of the games that successfully did this was Dark Forest, built on Gnosis, which uses a lot of zero knowledge proofs even for the gaming logic, which is not that easy to build. So I am very curious to see how Dojo comes up with these kind of modular plug and play things. And the second interesting project, and which I spoke about as Starknet, not just being used for scalability, but for modularity, is Madara. So Madara is started off as a sequencer project, a decentralized sequencer for Starknet. But now they are going in a direction where they would also want to facilitate building app chains on top of Starknet, which I think is a very interesting concept, because if you think about different applications that are being built on top of blockchain, or if you see the different applications that are currently being built in Web 2 world, they all use their own stacks because they all have a particular problem statement that they want to cater to. So we think app chains would be like a good futuristic thing where people, I know a lot of people are already building app chains, but I think it's a huge use case that is not that explored. So definitely projects like this are really cool. And then we have a bunch of like cool NFT projects and stuff like that that's already going on. But these two, and then I would say the third is around account abstraction. It was also mentioned in the morning's keynote by Chi that account abstraction, native account abstraction is a feature of Starknet. So using that, how can we tweak and build products? So we already have Argent and Bravo's two wallets which use native account abstraction on Starknet. And I think these are some of the cool things that are happening in ecosystem.
Thank you, Gian. Interesting that you mentioned Dark Forest. I think one of the earliest successful ZK games that would ever built on Gnosis chain. And you mentioned Dojo, which is another game engine on Starknet. And now, Anthony, I've spoken to you and we talked a bit about games and privacy, and I know you have like interesting take. What do you think are the cool projects? Do you think they are games or anything that you would like to highlight and want to showcase, probably be of Elio or any other things?
Yeah, so I think gaming is one really key focus area and where ZK can be leveraged for sure. My only thing with games is that like 95% of games are considered imperfect information games where one user has some information about the game and the other person has another set of information that the other players don't know about and vice versa. So really what we want to try to do is use the privacy part of ZK, not just for scaling the games, which is super important, but actually enable that imperfect information to exist, right? Because on public blockchain platforms, you would basically see all that information from the get-go. So for example, like if I'm trying to play poker and I can see everybody's cards, their hands, you can't play poker, you know what I mean? So if you want to decentralize a game, which we can have a debate about, and it's an imperfect information game, which is 95% of games, then you want to try to have privacy operating there in some way. Now, ZK is not the only way to do this, right? You could try commit and reveal schemes, fully homomorphic encryption, trusted execution environments, but I think at the current stage, like ZK is a really good option, and we want to have a stack that lets people actually build with that, and so that's why we have our own programming language and VM and operating system to do that. So I think games are cool. There's nothing in production yet, but some people have developed some interesting gaming toolkits. So for example, we took the game Liar's Dice, which it's the game they play in Pirates of the Caribbean. Maybe people know about it. Anyway, we added some ZK game mechanics to it. And actually package that into a toolkit. So if somebody, for example, wants a dice roll mechanic that uses ZK, they can pull that from this toolkit. So I think that's really cool. And then another interesting area is ZKML. So without taking up the whole time on this panel, the high-level idea is how can I prove that the output of some algorithm I'm running is correct without having to run the algorithm myself or know the data set that was being used. You can do that with zero knowledge. And that's going to be really important as regulation starts to evolve around AI and machine learning. And so there's actually a grantee that implemented fixed point arithmetic in our programming language and built a single layer neural net and then built a use case around calculating like loan decisions on like an open data set. So again, not a super complex project, but it shows the potential for what could be in the future. So yeah, I would say
Thank you, Anthony, for sharing both games and ZKML front. What do you think, Angus? What do you think it's a cool ZK project if you have seen on Mina or any project? What do you think that this is like? Oh wow, the ZK application.
Am I allowed to say ZK Lend as well?
I mean, you can, but yeah, aside from ZK Land probably because
Okay.
Jane's going to talk about ZK Land. Yeah.
So ZK Lend is a given, obviously, because I think it's very interesting having a conversation about games. Anthony mentioned that on-chain games, there's certain drawbacks, right? Like all the information is public. We've seen some very interesting uses of a feature of Mina, which is called recursion, where you can generate a zero-knowledge proof and then use that as an input to a further proof. So we've seen people at hackathons entering, kind of people who have interest in developing games and using blockchain technology to make games in a kind of different way. And what they do is they use this concept of recursion in turn-based games to basically have players verify that they've played their turns in a game in a correct way, and then they pass that round each other in a kind of peer-to-peer way, and so they don't have to go through the blockchain, right? Usually you would post some sort of evidence that you've played your turn to the blockchain, and then people would check the blockchain. So we're actually decentralizing this process by you pass these proofs around, you can use the proofs to check the order and the validity of the previous turns of the game, and then you can kind of post the result or checkpoints onto the chain. So we've seen people do that with these kind of turn-based games, and so I think that represents a really interesting way of using zero-knowledge proofs to basically kind of validate the state of a game that you're playing. That's something that's been really cool, and we actually had someone in a recent hackathon use the same kind of concept to allow parties to open state channels between each other, and do it all off-chain. So giving, I think, zero-knowledge proofs and this idea of rolling them up like in this order, like using them to generate further proofs, opens up a whole lot of possibilities of doing things off-chain as well. So there's a cool group of guys as well who are building the concept of autonomous worlds, where basically instead of having a company that runs a game server, then when they get bored or they move on to the next thing, they shut it down and you can't play the game with your friends anymore. They're saying, right, well, we're going to build this kind of self-sustaining, autonomous, decentralized place where you can go and play games. So I think that's a really cool idea, and I think zero knowledge can definitely help with some of these things where, as Anthony was saying again, right, this idea of imperfect information. There's some information that everyone needs to have, but you can't know what it is until you do some certain things. So I think that's going to be an interesting area to kind of build these multiplayer, multifaceted gaming experiences. And also I would like to go on to say we've got some other cool projects on Meetup as well. It's not all about gaming. We have recently a company called eTonic, which is based in Luxembourg, has announced a kind of payments proof of concept, which does these kind of uses zero knowledge technology, uses the proofs that Mina generates to do privacy preserving payments, but in a compliant way, right? So as Anthony was saying, right, it's not, privacy doesn't have to be, there's been some people who use it to do things to break the law, but that's just one group of people using technology for one specific purpose. We don't go after the technology, right? The technology can be used by other people for other purposes, and so these people at eTonic have built this payments proof of concept to give a different payments experience that, as we say, preserves more privacy, but does that in a way which is compliant with what regulators and governments, want out of a payment system. And I think one other one that I would mention is someone who, as part of our ZK Ignite program, which is a grants program that supports projects that people kind of submit to the community to be voted on to receive support, has come up with this idea. It's called ZK BioAuth, and it's about enabling verification, validation, and sharing of data in the biotechnology industry, which is traditionally one which is siloed. People don't trust each other about where data is or what it is. So that's something that's really cool as well. And can I say ZK Land again?
Yeah, you can. Thank you so much, Angus. We shared a bit about recursion, how it is being used in games, in turn-based games. Also share a bit about like payment, like that's compliant with the standard. I think that's pretty cool. Finally, Jane, I know like all of us here like ZK Land. Like, so what do you think is a cool project where you can like you want to highlight more on ZK Land, or you have any other cool ZK projects out there that you say it makes you go like, wow, this is a cool ZK project?
I know you guys can't help it. You guys just love my project. I'm kidding. Maybe I'll talk a little bit more about storage proofs. Actually, it's something that's been on my mind for a while. There's a project called Herodotus, which is on Starknet, and they focus on something called storage proofs. And what it really means is that you're able to query the state of a blockchain without any trust assumptions. So let's just say I'm Jane and I want to prove that 2 days ago I had $100 in my wallet as a balance. I may be able to query that, but you may have to trust some party to tell me that that information is true. Through storage proofs, they're actually generating a proof to say, actually, at this point of time, your balance is X, and you don't have to trust anyone, and this proof can be generated on any blockchain, but verified anywhere else. So if I want to prove something that happened on Polygon, but I actually want to communicate this message on Starknet, for example, I can actually take this proof onto Starknet and get it verified. And because storage proofs actually utilize starks or snarks, from my understanding, the verification, the proof size is actually relatively small. So verification can happen pretty easily across many different blockchains. Specifically, use cases for storage proofs may include things like oracles. So if I have a price feed, let's just say fed onto layer 3, and a storage proof is generated, any other chain can actually digest this information, making kind of the whole oracle system a lot more efficient. You can do on-chain, or you can do, I guess, like, let's talk about account abstraction, right? Like, maybe if I want to set up my wallet in a way where if I don't make any transactions within a year, potentially the wallet gets released to a party that I designate, right? So how do I prove that I haven't made a transaction in a year? You can actually utilize storage proofs to prove these things. So I think it's still some pretty new concepts going on with storage proofs, but it's definitely something very fascinating, especially for me in DeFi, just given how information oftentimes gets manipulated.
I think that's an interesting point that you shared. You talk about storage proofs. I personally have been looking into that. I personally have been trying to implement storage proof on Mina, but for this hackathon, I didn't have the time, but probably next time. Now we have talked about like the cool ideas that we have seen on ZK. Probably you start with Jane. Like, what do you think is stopping people from ZK? Now that there's so many cool stuff that can be built, but what is stopping people?
Yeah, I think maybe I'll speak specifically on StarkNet because we're only on StarkNet and maybe not the other networks right now. But I think it's very much an evolving network, right? Like the way I remember StarkNet when I first kind of entered into the ecosystem, it was like, okay, like ZK rollups, validity rollups, scalability, really cool. But like over time, there's been so many changes, like account abstraction, recursion, I don't know, like even things like multi-call, and then you guys are doing like ZK EVMs, rewriting the sequencer. There's actually so many components to it. So if you understand StarkNet at a point in time, let's just say 6 months ago, and you went away, I probably would, dare I say, you probably would only understand a small bit of it right now. So I think the challenge is, as a newcomer, and especially as a user who may not be technically savvy, I think there are two parts to it. One is just the constant evolution of the blockchain makes it pretty hard to understand what's going on. But I think the second part of it is the potential that the blockchain has and where it's at. There are discrepancies, right? Like you can't, Rome isn't built in a day, and neither is StarkNet. So there are performance issues that do come around once in a while, and I think it's all about patience and just understanding the whole setup of it in order for people to really commit to the network. Yeah, so that's my answer.
Yeah, I generally agree with your take. StarkNet is evolving quickly, and you really need to catch up on a weekly basis to get to know what's going on. What about Mina? Like, what do you think is stopping people from like building more dApps on Mina? I know there are a lot of people. You have been in hackathons, but what do you think is like the stopping, like the main stopping point, like that forces people to like not build on Mina?
Well, you know what I'm going to say. Nothing is stopping people from building on Mina. It really is a world of opportunity. All you have to do is go to our docs, install Snarky.js, which is a TypeScript library, and get building. Also, if you want to install and build the Mina node, Rome wasn't built in a day, but it takes significantly less than 24 hours to build the Mina node from source. So I think on a serious note, as I said, right, so you can build ZK apps on Mina with Snarky.js, which is TypeScript. So the idea of that has been to make things easier for developers. I think the technical barrier to entry will lower over time for ZK in general as tooling improves and as more developers come into the fold and kind of help each other out. But I think ZK in general is kind of a brain frying concept. I think there was a guy doing a talk earlier, and he had this table up with combinations of bits of cryptography, right? And there was, you know, here's the advantages, here's the disadvantages, here's some boxes where this is good, this is slow. It kind of reminded me, like, 5 years ago of when we were all trying to figure out what blockchains were and talking about different consensus mechanisms. Here's what this blockchain does, here's what that one does, this one's slow, this one's fast, here's this, here's that. I think it'll take time and we will get there, but explaining ZK and what you can do with it, because it's different to what developers have been used to working with before, we need to figure out the mental model that we need to give them. We need to tell them. I don't think developers who build applications that use ZK need to necessarily understand all the math. They just kind of need to know what things are, what they do, and how it makes sense to them. And I think talking to lots of developers, there's different ways that I've been able to kind of, first of all, myself, reach the aha moment, the moment where it clicks in my brain and I understand what's going on, and then also explaining it to people in different ways, finding out how I kind of elicit that in developers. So I think that's something that, I don't know how to get rid of that feedback, but yeah, so to finish up, I think explaining and spreading that understanding of ZK, what it can do, how developers can use it, I think that's something that at the moment is, something that we're working on, and that will improve, will make it a lot easier for more developers to use ZK in future.
Thank you, Angus, for your take. I think a couple of years back, I think some of us still remember, ZK is known to be like a moon math kind of technology. That means you really have to understand like the deep cryptography, a few elliptic curve or whatever to understand ZK. But like Angus said, like tooling will probably help people to develop on ZK without knowing all these things. So I think Alio is probably also doing a similar approach. They have their own tooling to make things easier. But again, what do you think is stopping people from building more products on ZK? Now that we have some toolings, or do you think it's not enough? What do you think?
As Angus said, I think if you put your mind to it and you really want to get into this, there's nothing stopping you. Like really, there are a lot of tools. There's a lot of great things that you can be leveraging. But two things I would highlight, I know it's been said like multiple times right now. I think there can be more tooling for sure. I definitely have seen that as an initial barrier, and that's why we're trying to incentivize people that want to help build some of this tooling to make the ecosystem more robust. So for sure, that is one. Another item that I would highlight that Angus mentioned is like the mental model. So specifically in Alio's case, right, we're a UTXO based model, right? So most people that are coming from the Ethereum ecosystem that want to build on Alio, they already have a mental model for how to build in like the account model. And so that is a large barrier to entry for when people come into the ecosystem. But what I can say is once you kind of get the fundamental understanding and you can leverage the tools that we have to offer, it's really not that hard. I like to use myself as an example. I'm not an engineer, did not study computer science. I studied something called political economy, which is like a liberal arts degree. But I learned how to use our programming language, and I built not super complex programs, but I built stuff. So my answer is if I can do it, and you're a web developer who has years of experience, you will have absolutely no problem. And our programming language, Leo, is designed similarly to languages like TypeScript or Rust, something a web developer would be familiar with, and we abstract away the complexity of building with zero knowledge. Again, I think that's been mentioned here, right? Just making it so that you don't need to be a cryptography expert or have to write your own circuits or do these complex things to leverage ZK. So I would say, yeah, just to highlight some of the other points mentioned, those would be probably the main things that we're trying to focus on right now to make the barrier a lot lower.
Thank you so much, Anthony, for your take on Leo and what's possibly stopping people and encouraging people to not give up. If you have a way, if you have a way, and Gian, Gian, what do you think? I know Jane shared a bit about the hardship of developing Starknet. You have to always keep up to date. What is your take as a dev ed for Starknet?
It's definitely true for me also. I have to keep myself updated every month or so. And like all my other panelists, I would like to say nothing, but it's not at all true. There's 100% lot of things that we could do to improve the ecosystem, especially from a Starknet context. I would say, I think one of the things that I've seen, and this could be like a geographical, contextual to geographical areas as well, is that because ZK is so new, there are a lot of projects that are just coming up in this space. And for many developers, they don't see a career path in like these projects. Like, do they contribute just as devs? Are there going to be permanent jobs for them in this space? Like, why is it useful for them to learn? And already I think some of the folks spoke about it, that the technical barrier or the learning curve to go deeper and build more technically complex projects is a little higher than your traditional technologies. That is one. And second is the amount of resources that are available in general that simplify zero knowledge proof arithmetics is just not enough, because most of these come in the form of white papers or academic papers that have been written by academicians that have very complex mathematical formulas. For example, in the talk before, there was a slide on powers of tau ceremony and things like that, which is not very easy to understand. And if there isn't enough context behind why this is being done and how this is useful, I think it just, like, people just drop off, right? It's not worth for them. So I think these are some of the things going forward which will be fixed automatically. Like, there will be an abundance of jobs when there are a lot of ZK projects. So people would automatically think that, yeah, there is a career that I can make here, so let me put some effort to learn that. So I think that will change. And then specifically from a StarkNet context, our team is the education team. So we are trying to build things that can be very, not just developer focused, but also user focused. For example, our current effort is something called as StarkNet Book. You can find it on book.starknet.io. Initially, we decided that it will follow a Rust book format, so it will only have code samples. But we then thought that no, that StarkNet should not be just for developers. It should also be for other people who want to understand this ecosystem better. So now we have added a lot of chapters that introduce StarkNet right from the beginning. How does the architecture work? Why is there this need of this complex architecture? Why can't we build something which is already existing, like an Ethereum architecture or something like that? What do different components of this architecture do? So I think having users read this kind of documentation that talks more about the why, the how, and just the overall picture is also very necessary in the ZK space. So maybe a combination of all of this is what is something that's missing. But I feel like everyone's putting in their effort to make this better.
Thank you so much, Ian. We're out of time, but I would like to get a one-line short answer by all of you. Where do you see ZK is going and or it's being used in the future? One-line answer from you, Ian. Where do you see ZK? Just one line, like what your vision ZK will be in the next 45 years?
Okay, I think it has a great future, like a huge potential.
Thank you. What about you, Anthony? Where do you see ZK is going?
It's going to be the underpinnings of how to do security on the web.
Thank you. What about you, Angus?
ZK everything.
ZK everything. That's a very cool catchphrase there. Finally, Jane, what do you think?
I'm most excited about ZK compliance solutions because I work in DeFi.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. And that sums up our panel. Thank you so much to Jane, Angus, Anthony, and Gian. Thank you all for being here, and I hope you enjoyed the panel.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. And also thank you so much for staying with us in the morning section. So we have dedicated the whole morning for zero knowledge. So this is a time for us to have a lunch break. This is an instruction for you to get your food. There is food court at the ground floor right in the campus of Hong Bang International University. And for our guest speaker and organizer, please proceed to the 5th floor. And we'll be back for the afternoon section at 1:30 p.m. So see you at 1:30 p.m. for the next section about BUIDL Vietnam. Thank you.